The story of Puss in Boots, you remember, is a lie. It's a sanitized echo of a much older, darker tale. This story was never meant for children. It first appeared 475 years ago in Venice in a collection of cynical stories for adults, written by an author named Giovanni Francesco Straparola. So this investigation is less about how the cat helped its master, and more about what that cat truly was. We need to explore what its boots actually symbolized. By the end, you won't just know the story's dark origin. You will understand its hidden, cynical message about power, why we so often reward deception, and how evil gets its happy ending. You know the story. We all do. A poor miller's son inherits nothing but a talking cat. Just when he's about to give up, the cat asks for two things: a bag and a pair of boots. Through sheer wit, this clever feline presents gifts to the king from his fictional master, the Marquis of Carabas. He stages his master's drowning to steal him some fine clothes, and in the famous climax, he tricks a fearsome, shape-shifting ogre into becoming a mouse, securing a castle. It's a story we remember with fondness. The cat is a symbol of loyalty, a brilliant sidekick who uses his wits to elevate his master from poverty to royalty. But let's pause and look at what's really happening here. The so-called hero of the story, the master, does absolutely nothing. He is completely passive, a passenger in his own life. His success is built entirely on a foundation of lies. The cat is a master of fraud, identity theft, and coercion. And for this, he is celebrated. Why do we accept this? Why does this fairy tale, above all others, seem to grant a moral pass for what is clearly a campaign of criminal deception? These moral inconsistencies aren't just plot holes. They are scars, faint echoes of the original, much darker truth that has been buried for centuries. To uncover that truth, we have to begin our investigation with the single most illogical detail in the entire tale: the boots. Why would a cat need boots? The question seems almost childish, yet the answer has deep implications. That seemingly childish question is the key we need to unlock the entire 475-year-old mystery, because the boots actually expose the cat's true identity. And once you see what Puss really was, the entire fairy tale collapses into something far more sinister. I'm genuinely curious for those of you watching. Which version of this story do you remember most? Was it a classic illustrated book? Or did the swashbuckling Antonio Banderas version from the Shrek movies define Puss in Boots for you? Let me know down in the comments. Before we travel back 475 years, our first dig must happen right here, in the version of the story we think we know. Because the evidence of a deeper, stranger truth has been hiding in plain sight all along. We just needed to know how to look for it. Our first clue is the so-called hero of the story himself, the miller's son. Think about him for a moment. What are his defining qualities? Is he brave? No. Is he clever? Not at all. Is he virtuous? Absolutely not. The single most defining characteristic of the master is his complete and utter uselessness. He is an archetype of powerlessness. When faced with poverty, his first and only instinct is despair. He complains he will have to eat his cat and then die of hunger. He is a man with no agency, no plan, and no drive, which is the exact opposite of someone like you, who takes action by hitting that subscribe button to actively uncover these kinds of secrets. His success is entirely, 100%, unearned. It is handed to him by his helper. This is not an accident. It's the psychological engine of the entire story. The tale's purpose was never to celebrate a deserving young man getting a lucky break. Instead, it creates a moral vacuum. The master is a blank slate, a passive vessel waiting to be filled with wealth and status he did nothing to acquire. And this is profoundly important. It tells us that from its very inception, this story was never about human merit. It wasn't interested in rewarding hard work or celebrating ingenuity. The story intentionally makes the human protagonist irrelevant to prove a point. It directs our attention away from the man and forces us to focus on the true agent of change. The real power in the narrative. The cat. By making the master so completely helpless, the story screams that human virtue is worthless. The only thing that matters is having a powerful and morally flexible ally. The boy isn't the hero. He's just the beneficiary of a series of crimes. And that brings us to our second clue, the boots. But before we get to the boots, know this. That secret is so strange that by the end of this investigation, you will understand the cat was never a cat at all. The demand for boots is the strangest, most illogical part of the modern fairy tale. We just accept it. The cat wants boots, the boy gets them, and the story moves on. But let's stop and ask the obvious question. Why? A cat has no physical need for boots. It has paws perfectly suited for travel. The request has nothing to do with practicality. It is entirely symbolic. And its symbolism is the key to the unspoken pact that forms the heart of this story. In the human world, footwear has always been a powerful signifier of status, authority, and even humanity itself. Servants and the very poor often went barefoot. To wear boots was to be a person of standing, someone with the right to move through the world with agency, someone who could enter the courts of kings. When the master gives the cat a pair of boots, he is symbolically elevating it from the realm of animals into the world of men. He is granting it the authority to act on his behalf in human society. The boots are the physical token of a deal. They are the signature on a contract. The master, who has no power, gives the creature the one thing it needs to operate in the human sphere, a symbol of legitimacy. In return, the creature will use that newfound legitimacy to bend the rules of the human world for the master's benefit. This is so much darker and more complex than a simple story about a clever pet. It transforms the narrative into a kind of miniature Faustian bargain. The boy is a man with no soul to sell because he has nothing at all. So instead, he empowers an ambiguous entity to act in his name, unleashing it upon the world without asking any questions about the methods it will use. He outsources his ambition to a creature of unknown origin and morality. The boots are not a fashion statement. They are a license to commit fraud. And while the lies we remember are bad enough, they were invented to cover up a far darker crime at the heart of the original tale, the crime that truly secured the castle. We tend to recall the cat's actions as charming trickery. This is a dangerous watering down of the truth. We need to look at what the cat actually does, not as a fairy tale character, but as a criminal. This is the anatomy of a grand deception, and it happens in 3 distinct phases. First, the cat creates a completely fabricated identity, the Marquis of Carabas. This isn't just a white lie told at a party. This is a systematic, long-term campaign of identity fraud, designed to fool the highest levels of government. It's a complete invention, a lie so bold it becomes reality. Second, and more chillingly, is how the cat reinforces this lie. When the king's carriage passes by the fields, the cat runs ahead. He doesn't ask the peasants to lie for him, he commands them. In most classic versions, including Perrault's, he threatens them, telling them that if they don't say the fields belong to the Marquis of Carabas, they will be chopped up like mincemeat. This is not wit, this is terror. The cat is a mob boss, using fear and intimidation to build his master's empire. The entire foundation of the Marquis's wealth is built on the coerced testimony of terrified farmers. This is not a victimless crime. It is a conspiracy propped up by threats of gruesome violence. And third, the story normalizes this behavior. The feigned drowning, the theft of another man's clothes from the riverbank, the constant lying to the king. It's all presented as a grand, fun adventure. The story doesn't just contain deception, it is deception. It's a masterclass in normalizing what can only be described as a sociopathic worldview, teaching that success is a direct result of audacious, unrepentant criminal behavior. This worldview is so dark, it's no wonder that later storytellers felt the need to invent a moral loophole to make it all palatable, and that brings us to the most telling clue of all, the convenient monster they created to hide the truth. The climax of the story, we know, hinges on the defeat of a shape-shifting ogre. The cat tricks this monster into turning into a mouse, and then promptly eats him, winning the castle for his master. This is the moment where the cat's actions are finally unambiguously heroic. He has defeated a great evil and claimed his spoils. But it all feels a little too perfect, doesn't it? The existence of a monstrous, evil owner of the castle is incredibly convenient. It morally launders what is otherwise an act of grand theft, and likely murder. By making the victim an inhuman monster, the story gives us, the audience, permission to cheer for his demise. We don't have to feel bad about the castle being stolen because it was stolen from a villain. But this very convenience is the biggest red flag in the entire narrative. It's a narrative patch, a piece of storytelling plaster slapped over something much uglier. The ogre was a later invention, added to the story by French author Charles Perrault in 1697. He created the ogre to solve the story's single greatest moral problem. And that begs the question, if there was no ogre in the original tale, who owned the castle? And what really happened to them? The absence of the ogre points to a gaping hole in the center of the story, a hole that was deliberately covered up, because the original crime was no fairy tale. It was all too human. Our investigation now takes us back in time, to the source. We leave behind the sanitized world of storybooks and enter the cutthroat world of 16th century Italy. To find the real Puss in Boots, we must go to Venice, around the year 1550. Here, an author named Giovanni Francesco Straparola published a landmark collection of stories called Le Piacevoli Notti, or The Facetious Nights, and this was absolutely not a book for children. It was a collection of 75 tales framed as a 13-night-long party for Italian aristocrats escaping the plague. The stories they told were filled with everything that defined their world: shocking violence, political intrigue, bawdy humor, and a deep, pervasive cynicism about human nature. These were stories for adults who understood that life was brutal, that fortunes could be made and lost overnight, and that morality was often a luxury the powerful could not afford. And it is in this world, in this book, that our story was born, under its original title, Costantino Fortunato, or Lucky Costantino. The name itself is a clue. The hero isn't clever or virtuous, he's just lucky. Or is he? The context of Straparola's world is everything. It strips away the fantasy and reveals the tale for what it was, a hard-edged commentary on survival in a corrupt society. This was far from a bedtime story. It was a reflection of a world where ruthlessness was the ultimate virtue. And in this original version, the story holds a secret that completely redefines everything we thought we knew. This is the pivotal revelation. This is the linchpin of the entire mystery, the secret that the sanitized versions have hidden for centuries. In Straparola's original Italian text, the cat is not a cat. Not really. The story explicitly states that the animal given to Costantino is a fairy, a fata, in disguise. Let that sink in. The helper we see is not a clever talking animal, but a powerful, ancient, and deeply amoral supernatural entity. This is the secret, and it changes the story from a quirky tale into something far older and more primordial. The boy's success is not the result of a witty pet's loyalty. It is the result of a magical contract. It is the work of an otherworldly being using its power to manipulate human affairs for its own inscrutable reasons. This reframes every single event in the narrative. The boots are no longer just a quirky symbol. They are a necessary tool, a magical glamour that allows this fairy creature to walk among men and operate within their world. The cat's impossible cleverness is no longer a stretch of the imagination. It is the calculated strategy of a supernatural intelligence. The story's focus is not on a boy and his cat. Instead, it's about a powerless human who becomes the beneficiary of a deal with a magical being from another world. And this ancient archetype, the human who forms a pact with a fairy or an imp for worldly gain, is one of the oldest and most dangerous in all of folklore. It never ends well, or rather, it never ends without a terrible price. And in this story, the price is paid by someone else. Now we can finally solve the mystery of the castle. We can finally expose the real crime the ogre was invented to conceal. In Straparola's original tale, there is no shape-shifting monster. There is no convenient villain. There is only a castle. And it belongs to a human nobleman named Signor Valentino. The cat, or rather the fairy in disguise, learns that Lord Valentino is away. It then goes to the castle, and through means the story leaves chillingly vague. It ensures the castle is empty and ready for its new owner. But the most damning detail is what happens next. As the king's royal procession approaches the castle, with the newly clothed Costantino in tow, word arrives that Lord Valentino has just died. The story describes it as an unhappy and unforeseen accident. Unforeseen by whom? Certainly not by the fairy, who now stands as the sole authority at the castle gates. The fairy immediately seizes the opportunity. It lies to the king, claims the castle belongs to its master, the Marquis, and the king, having no reason to doubt it, congratulates Costantino on his magnificent estate. There was no battle with a monster. There was no clever trick. There was only the suspicious death of a nobleman and the immediate, fraudulent seizure of his property. The story rewards Costantino for profiting directly from the death of another human being, a death that his supernatural agent may very well have magically orchestrated. This is the dark heart of the original tale. It's about grand theft and, very likely, murder by proxy, not outwitting an ogre. With this final piece of evidence, the full, hidden message of the 475-year-old story becomes terrifyingly clear. Costantino Fortunato is a dark instruction manual for social climbing in a broken world. It is a deeply cynical guide to success that lays out a step-by-step plan. Step 1. Abandon all hope in human virtue. The story establishes from the first sentence that diligence and goodness will leave you destitute. Step 2. Secure a powerful, amoral patron. Your success will not come from your own efforts, but from the intervention of an outside force that does not play by human rules, in this case, a fairy. Step 3. Create a completely false identity. Your real self is worthless. You must invent a persona of wealth and importance, the Marquis of Carabas, and project it with absolute confidence. And finally, Step 4. Be willing to lie, to cheat, to threaten the innocent, and to profit from the death of others. The story argues that these are not sins. They are necessary strategies. It is a philosophy of pure, unadulterated pragmatism. The original Puss in Boots is a chilling reflection of the anxieties of the 16th century, a time when many believed the system of nobility was fundamentally unjust and could only be beaten by mirroring its own inherent ruthlessness. The tale that if the world is a corrupt game, the only way to win is to cheat more effectively than your opponents. And this brings us to the profound human connection, the reason this dark philosophy has survived for so long, hidden beneath the surface of a children's story. This tale is a power fantasy for the disenfranchised. It whispers a dangerous and seductive idea that resonates just as strongly today as it did in 1550, that if the system is truly rigged against you, then breaking all the rules is not just an option, it is the only logical response. It's a primordial justification for the belief that the end justifies the means. We see this exact worldview play out all around us. We see it in the corporate scandals, where executives cook the books to feign success. We see it in the political arena, where leaders manufacture crises and spread disinformation to seize power. We see it in the dark side of modern hustle culture, the fake it till you make it mantra that sometimes crosses the line into outright fraud. Puss in Boots is the ancient archetype of this idea. He is the ultimate validation for doing whatever it takes to win, no matter the moral cost. The story survives because it speaks to a dark part of our shared human psychology, the secret, desperate desire to have a magical ally who will break all the rules on our behalf, so we can have the kingdom without ever getting blood on our own hands. Puss in Boots was never a children's story. It was a dark fantasy about a young man who makes a pact with a supernatural entity, using deception and profiting from death to claw his way to the top. It's a chilling guide to success that argues the only sin is getting caught. This idea of censoring a story's dark heart to make it palatable for children is a pattern we see everywhere. But the reasons for the censorship are not always the same. In the case of Rapunzel, the tower wasn't just to hide her from the world. The 400-year-old secret they censored from her legend reveals what the witch was really doing to her in that isolated room, a secret far more disturbing than simple imprisonment. To uncover that, click the video on your screen right now.